Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my next small step RP-1 career mode playthrough. I wanted to save up all of the Mars exploration system stuff for one episode, so hopefully we can get through all of that and get that moving. But first, before we get to that, we are currently building pretty much in order, A, B, and C, and we are also about to finish up with SLC-1, Space Launch Complex 1, which is my first unlimited weight pad. So we can just move on to that, and there we go. Now we have it. We have the final... The only difference for the SLC-1, the final version, level 7 of the launch pad, is the additional tracks that they put out here, which reflects the launch carrier that they will use to bring my gigantic rockets out to the pad. But that does unlock Mars Exploration System C, which is something that I think is like 2,200 tons, which is well more than my next biggest pad, which is Complex 1,500. So that is what we are going to be using, and we are just now a couple of days away from finishing up the first thing to be built. Alright, so we've rolled out System B to the pad, and I have flipped things around so that System C is now using my heavier production line, and System A is using the lighter one. And that should get everything out well in time, and in enough time as well to roll things out. But there is a bit of docking that needs to happen first. So we can do that before I get finished with System C. And we're also finishing up Space Station Era Electronics Research, which is a blue sky node with no actual tech, but unlocks all sorts of cool things in the near future. Alright, so here on the pad is Mars Exploration System A, which is launching into the plane of the moon. We have a little bit more than, or a little bit less than 16 days on our launch window to transfer window towards Mars. We have ignition and liftoff, the slow and ponderous liftoff of a Paladin rocket, indeed, coming up off the pad and bringing up on a Saturn 1B type architecture. So this is my Saturn 2B that we are launching, or Paladin 2B, I should say, that is bringing up the Mars transfer, or the first bit of our Mars exploration system. So yeah, this has been an interesting exercise building all of this Mars architecture. We're going to see just how bad of an idea it was, but my plan right now is we are heading up into a 200-kilometer circular orbit in the plane of the moon. We are going to be sending up the Vessel B, which is ready to go, ready to launch at the smaller complex. That is going to be heading up here shortly, and the idea is this is going to be a stationary target that the other spacecraft is going to launch up into, or is going to launch underneath, and then I'm going to be able to kind of try to target the right time to launch so that it can chase briefly and catch up quickly. That is the hope anyways, because A here does not have anything that is, well, let me put it this way. It does have the architecture that it might need to rendezvous and dock, but it would be burning fuel that I have intended to use at Mars. So that's not anything that I want to use. So this is going to be effectively a stationary target, and that is why it is launching first. Mars Exploration System B has an extra, because it's a very light module, it has an extra what do you call it? A tug, basically, that I'm going to be using to rendezvous and dock with this spacecraft. So yeah, the Paladin 2B spacecraft actually works super well. It's, like I said, based on the Saturn 1B architecture with 8 H1s and 1 J2, and it's just been fantastic. Like, it's a big, heavy rocket that requires a decent-sized pad, but it is incredibly capable in just a lot of ways, and is able to put up a lot of mass without a whole lot of cost, or complication, I guess I should say. It's a pretty expensive rocket. But it's a lot more capable. It's even more capable than a lot of my late-stage Titan rockets. I think like my new Titan 3 architecture works a little bit better in some respects, but the numbers are getting real squishy lately. like my Paladin 2B rocket, I have we have ignition and separation of our core stage, and now the J2 is on its way, which is just fabulous. But yeah, my Paladin 2B, which is what this spacecraft is able to get something like 26 tons into low Earth orbit. My Titan 3E is able to get 20 tons into orbit, which includes using that big Centaur upper stage. And I'm actually going to... This is going to just take far too long, so I'm just going to time warp a little bit. So yeah, it's like not a huge improvement, but it's it costs quite a bit more, weighs about the same, actually weighs a little bit less because this stage is liquid hydrogen fueled, which is lovely. So yeah, it's I'm getting like marginal incremental improvements with my Paladin rockets as I step up. I had a whole Paladin 3B built, which was supposed to be the next step in my architecture. I basically discovered that the E1 engines are kind of garbage. They're just not very efficient for what they do compared to the H1s that I'm using, the late stage H1s that I use on my first stage here. And they're also much worse than the F1s at the same amount of thrust. Like with the number of engines that you would need to get a certain amount of thrust that one F1 could provide, the F1 is going to be much better, more efficient, and cost effective than that number of E1 engines. And so to facilitate that, I built a Paladin 3B that actually used a single F1 engine, but I couldn't figure out how to, like, what verniers I should use, and I couldn't really make the rocket perform properly. Like, it was very wobbly, it was very straight, it just performed very badly, and I haven't found it to be useful in any way. But on paper, it was able to get 32 tons into low Earth orbit for not a lot more cost than a Paladin 2B. So yeah, maybe I need to revisit that. But let me know down in the comments what you guys use as verniers if you're going to use a single stick F1 booster, because I really have no idea. But yeah, we are coming to the end of this burn here. Just 10 seconds left and we are going to be finishing this up, and that is the end of this particular rocket's mission. Boop, there we go. We are at 200 kilometers, roughly circular. I do have a little bit extra delta V if I wanted to get myself into a different orbit, but I really don't think that I do. I think that we are ready to just cut this stage and call that good, and then we will be coming to meet up with it here shortly. So we are going to do that, and I'm going to activate this avionics for just a moment to kill rotation so that we are at least just pointing forward. And these don't actually all need to be extended right now. I don't want to poke our our craft to death as we are docking with it. So you see, I did resolve some of the complaints, or not complaints, but some of the feedback that you all had. This has changed a little bit from what you saw in the planning, but I have changed to using the KTDU 425As, which I'm pretty sure are Russian upper stage stage combustion engines that use UDMH and NTO, so that's kind of one of the fuels that the Agena spacecraft uses. But I found that with 50 ignitions and very low thrust, like they're like 20 kilonewtons a piece, I think, that 4 of these actually perform about as well as the gigantic SPS AJ10 engine. That they perform a little bit better across the board, and they're much smaller, which I liked. So yeah, so I'm using these for a lot of my upper stage action lately. So I have changed that. That was not part of any feedback anybody gave me. That was just me testing different engines because I didn't actually like the way that the SPS worked. But that gets us 7,559 meters per second with the full burn of 745 seconds. The other reason why I like this one is that maybe it's just not configured properly for test flight, but it doesn't have a rated burn time. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And it's not pressure fed either, which is the big one. It has very similar performance to the AJ-10, but the lack of chance of failure and the lack of high pressure tanks, which reduces the mass, shaved off about 5 tons from our build, which is pretty huge for the same amount of Delta V, pretty much. I know it's not going to be 7,500 once I attach everything, but it's basically the same Delta V per my testing. So yeah, I've done that, and I've also added a couple things that are very important for the return trip. I've added 2 Snap 19 RTGs to the transfer stage itself, because later on this is going to fly on its own. Like, this part is all going to separate off once I'm done with all of my travels in the Mars system, and we are heading home, and we are going to bring back just this heat shield, parachute, and science avionics core back home to drop off samples into the Earth atmosphere. And we also have a retractable parabolic antenna, which is just powerful enough to maintain contact with Earth and not do a whole lot of science in and of itself, because we have these big transfer dishes that we will be primarily using for that purpose. So yeah, that is those are the changes that I've made to this. Otherwise, this is pretty much the same as when we saw it in my testing. So now it's time to move on to Exploration System B, where we will be attempting to rendezvous. All right, here on the pad is the second of our Mars Exploration System launches. We have ignition and liftoff of the very creatively named Mars Exploration System B. So this is the second of 3 ships that are going up into orbit that is going to be taking our Mars spacecraft and assembling it there so that we can send it off all in one giant launch. Or 3 launches? 2 regular-sized launches and then 1 giant launch, really, is what we have on the docket here. So this one, pretty standard stuff. We are setting this up on a Titan 3D, so that would be without the additional upper stage. It does have kind of a custom upper stage tug that I've mentioned that we are using to do the rendezvous and docking. But other than that, this is the Titan 3 model that does not actually have any of the additional built-in stuff. Like the Titan 3C had the actual Titan 3C. I know that might get a little confusing between the real ones and the ones that I talk about here on the show. But the Titan 3C, the original one, had a trans stage, which was in a dual AJ-10 system. And then the Titan 3E that I'm basing that I have used on one of my previous launches has a Centaur kind of thing up on top with 2 RL-10s. So yeah, this is the Titan 3D, the one that has no upper stage whatsoever and can get a pretty decent amount to low Earth orbit for very little money, about 15 tons, just shy of that, and it's able to loft that for at least before rollout costs and integration costs, about 8,500 funds, something like that. So yeah, it's a really nice system, and I really enjoy the Titans. Like, I really enjoy the fact that these 2 big strap-on boosters have gotten us up to about 40 kilometers before our main engine has even thought about starting. And you can see we have indeed switched to the LR87 with the extended nozzle, so we do have that extra performance there, and that does mean we have switched back to Aerozine and NTO for the main tanks. And there we go. We have the side boosters coming off at like 5 or 10 frames per second. I guess I just haven't reloaded my game in a while. And now we are burning our way up. So yeah, nothing else to do there. We are just moving on up, and you can see that we are like, I have timed this about as well as I possibly could. It is going to go flying overhead here very, very quickly, and then we will just have a little bit to catch up. So I'm going to be shy by just a little tiny bit, which is killing me a little bit, because we're basically at closest approach right now, and it's going to be getting ahead of us. So I have to hope that we're going to be able to accelerate to the point where we can catch up still. But there we go. We have the core stage has staged off, and we are now using the LR-91 upper stage, and the amount that it is pulling away is just reducing and reducing. We are just 300 kilometers away, and that amount is actually increasing still. But yeah, so I probably should have listened to my gut and gotten us into a less than 200 kilometer circular orbit, but this should be fine. I should still be able to figure this out by using the Agena to kind of dip down a little bit. Although I wonder if I just do this and then cut the engine at about 150. There we go. And stage off, kill rotation, RCS on, all of that. There we go. So yeah, now we are a little bit lower than the target that we are chasing, which means we will catch up to it slowly over time. And you can see that we'll be a little bit closer on our next pass. If I add a maneuver here and just add one orbit, you can see we are closer still one pass later. So yeah, this was about as good as I could have gotten it. Like, without doing anything, we've already gotten real close. So now you can see we are chasing the System A around and just getting closer and closer. And then as we pass that, you can see that the next one is going to be a little bit closer still. Let me just see if I do this and then just add one orbit. Okay, so we do need to fix our orbit a little bit here shortly. All right, so there we go. We have just a little bit of an intercept burn that is going to bring us in very close at a very low relative speed. So yeah, this is one of my better intercepts, especially coming directly off of a launch. So we will just say, go ahead and execute this node, please and thank you. And we're firing up the engine and preparing to get a little bit closer to our target. There we go. So we just have one more burn that we will make when we get into a very close approach. All right, we are just about a minute away. So we will switch over to target velocity minus. And there you can see the craft coming our way. Right, our closest approach is in just a moment. 30 seconds away. And then we're going to get to about 0.6 kilometers. So we're going to want to fix that just a touch. Right, we're at about 1 kilometer. And I think that's good. So let's go ahead and kill our relative velocity. There we go. Good enough for me. So let's go ahead and target that, and now it's time to do that whole preparing for docking thing. The RCS on this is powerful enough that I really don't feel like I have to worry about pretty much anything else as far as getting this in the correct orientation. You can see I'm just moving this crosshair over to where we will be intersecting the path, and now I'm just time warping because we are pretty far away. You can see that we are passing by. All my parameters are mostly correct still, so I'm not stressed about it. And all right, we are just about ready. I don't want to slow down the relative velocity, but you can see that we are behind, right? Look at that, pretty cool. I love rendezvous and docking. It is a lot of fun. Hello, come on. Yeah, so I really enjoy this, and this is kind of like, it's just a good excuse to do some complicated construction, orbital construction. because this is something that I want to do in a pretty big way for my future Mars missions. Like when I'm sending crew to Mars, I'm going to have to do something like this, or something at least this complicated, right? So it's good to get the practice in now. All right, you can see it coming up there. Oops, a little too much. A little too much time warping. That should probably be the real title of this this series, is a little too much time warping. Always my downfall. All right, but we are lining up nicely. I don't have any particular orientation that is necessary for this, so I'm just pointing at whatever direction happened to be default, and now we are approaching at 0.15 meters per second, approaching this docking port. And now it's just, like I've said a million times, it's just a matter of keeping all of these little doodads lined up, making sure that we are approaching as safely and carefully as possible, and straight on as can be. Which I find a lot easier to do with instruments than with actual visuals. And there we go. Kerchunk. We got it. We are docked. We are in. Everything is fantastic. Okay, so that is 2 of these down, and now this is sitting in that 200 kilometer by 200 kilometer orbit, which should be easy enough for us to get the C spacecraft in. And this craft is the lander, which I know is pretty long and thin, which is going to be problematic, but I have tested it, and I have gotten it to work out, and it's fairly stable with the 4 landing legs. Don't build landers like this. This is actually a terrible idea. Build them, you know, short and fat. That's the way. That's the way towards stability. But yeah, it's already done, so whatever. I wanted it to be small enough to fit inside of a fairing, which was my limiting factor. All right, so this is going to kind of end up being the front, and then we have all of this stuff, and then we have our rover built in here. We have our lander and our return rocket and all of that stuff all settled up inside there. What I would love to be able to do now is find a way to transfer some of this Aerozine and NTO all the way up into this thing, because I didn't mean to spend as much of this as I did. And I'm going to need this for entry and landing of the, what do you call it? Of my rover and stuff, and my lander. All right, so I enabled the crossfeed on a bunch of stuff between here and there, and that looks like it actually did it. So there we go. I am now going to fill up the tanks on our descent craft here. Whoops! Oh, stop clicking stuff. And that is what we're going to need, because I don't actually need this tug for anything else. Mostly because it's out of ignitions. Like I would actually totally use this for other to get the rest of this craft into an orbit with the final stage, but I'm out of ignitions. So that's the reason why I don't use the Aegina for much anymore. So now we can just decouple this node. Yes, you do not have the avionics to control whatever is going on here, but you should otherwise be just fine. And this is now coming away. And I can just point it retrograde and fly away into the sunset using the last of our Aerozine and NTO. And yeah, there we go. So that is how we have gotten the A and B into orbit, and those are all set up and ready to be connected to the final stage of our Mars exploration system, which is basically just the transfer stage. So that spacecraft that we have there that we are flying away from now is everything we are sending to Mars, and the last thing that we are doing right now is just bringing up the transfer stage that is going to propel it. So fingers crossed that I'm able to do that with enough delta V to make it all work. But yeah, now this thing is going to burn up, so we are going back home. All right, this absolute chonker preparing to launch just after dawn. 1975. We are 10 seconds from launch of the transfer stage for the Mars exploration system. This is a big one. We have ignition of 4 F-1 engines and liftoff of Mars Exploration System C on the debut launch of our Paladin 4 rocket. Yes, this is based roughly on the Saturn C4 concept, which was kind of exactly what it sounds like, with 4 F1 engines that I've stuffed underneath the 6-meter architecture that I've been using so far. It's a little bit small, but it works just fine for what we are trying to do. This is kind of a custom fit stage that should, in theory, just get this thing up into orbit. But I spent a long time struggling to find a way to get a J2 engine with a fully fueled set of fully fueled J2 engine in orbit. I had so much trouble trying to figure it out, and I was trying to do it under 1,500 tons to launch it on the existing pad, but I could not make the numbers work. And so we have 4 F1 engines, this is almost the Saturn V, sort of, kind of, that is heading us up into orbit right now. And we are going pretty well so far. I have not been messed up by the by test light, thank goodness. This rocket is so enormous that it was actually too tall for the vehicle assembly building. This is the first time I've actually had to use the hangar extender to pull the roof off so that I could actually build this monster of a rocket. So yeah, this absolute massive thing pushing off the surface of the Earth with 31 meganewtons. We have dumped 1,300 tons of fuel so far, and we still have a little ways to go before this first stage burns out. I just cannot express how monstrous F1 engines are. They're amazing. They're so good. They're so powerful, and they require such a massive stage to actually launch. But all that said, we should be getting up with this into a pretty decent orbit, and as a the rocket that I have built here, the Paladin 4, is intended for exactly this sort of super heavy lift, like space station in one launch sort of launches. All right, so we are just about ready to burn out that first stage. We have gone from 2,300 tons down to 400, less than 400 tons, and we are now separating off that stage and firing up. We have the second stage has 2 J2 engines, so that is where it diverges from the actual NASA Saturn C4 concept, which I don't think ever flew, but they did have planned. I think they went straight from Saturn 1B to Saturn 5 in actuality. But yeah, so this thing is kind of kitted out as this is kind of a single launch vehicle. Like, I'm going to be using this the Paladin 4 for a lot of other things in the future. But yeah, this is going to be kind of a single launch thing, even though I'm going to be using this architecture for a lot of future launches for space stations and stuff. But this is set up so that I can use this monster of a first stage or second stage to get into our rendezvous with the other spacecraft. So I want to do it as quickly as possible because inside here, I don't know why this thing has not popped off the surely the atmosphere is thin enough to break off the fairing by now. So with the fairing off, you can see the monstrous upper stage or payload stage. This is the transfer stage that we are going to use to get the Mars exploration system on its way towards Mars, and it has a full set of wrapped MLI layers around it, so it should be able to hold onto its fuel for when we get up into orbit. But I really don't want to take that chance, and I want this to be as fast of a rendezvous as possible. So I still have 3 minutes of burn time, so let's go ahead and fast forward just a touch. But yeah, we should end up with about 800 meters per second, which should, as we've demonstrated previously, be more than enough to get into a nice quick rendezvous. Unfortunately, this did not line up as well as it possibly could have, like the other launch did. You can see that the our target spacecraft is about a third of the way around the planet, so we are going to have to spend some time getting there, and there's not a whole lot we can do to accelerate that, as I understand it, unless I wanted to push the other craft up into a higher orbit. Alternatively, I could put this into a weird high orbit, but I really want to be careful with how much fuel I spend. All right, so we are coming to the end of this burn, and we are going to have a good 800 meters per second remaining, which is very, very cool. This stage does not have any MLI layers, so this may in fact burn off a lot faster than it's going to boil off up here. You can see there's no boil off loss yet, but there is heat penetration that is slowly increasing. And this stage is also perfectly capable of doing the rendezvous by itself. I just wanted to give this stage as much chance as possible to do the work if I can, so that I don't have to do it with this one. All right, so we are in orbit. Let's see what we can do to rendezvous quickly. All right, so one thing that I am pretty damn sure of is we are not actually going to be able to maintain any fuel in this thing between here and when we get there. So I'm basically just going to be holding on to this as a gigantic stage with a little bit of RCS. And that's about as much use as I'm going to get out of this thing. And also for the batteries, because I have stacked a huge battery on here of 250,000 electric charge that we're going to use to try to hold on until we get to the point where we can maybe rendezvous. All right, as expected, we are now coming out of that warp, and the batteries are just about toast. What I'll do at this point is I'm going to transfer the batteries into the upper stage, and of course the liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen in the bottom stage are also completely gone, which I expected, honestly. Like, that's not that big of a deal, and it's not that surprising, to be perfectly honest. So I'm just going to lock this so that we don't use that battery, ideally. Whoops. And now it's just, we're going to try to warp in, and it's at this next perigee and also descending node that we are going to make the slight burn adjustment to our trajectory that brings us up from 150 kilometers all the way up to, oops, sorry, I'm on my next orbit, one more, from 150 kilometers all the way up to the 200 kilometers that our target is sitting at. We should have just enough battery. Oh my god, it's so close. I think that's going to be enough. Because I just need a little bit, just a little tiny bit of battery before I end up throwing this stage away entirely. Looks like we are going to be just barely there. Okay, node is in 2 minutes. We have a little bit of power left, and this thing is still fully charged. Very nice. Point ourselves nodeward. This gigantic stage, which, you know, I probably should have guessed that this was going to be an issue, but I sort of didn't, and I think it's going to be fine. It is not entirely clear if this is going to be fine. Okay, so I'm just going to, we're like 30 seconds away. When we're about 30 seconds away, that's when I'm going to fire up the RCS. There we go. Oh, it's going to take a lot longer than that. But we are just getting through this delta V here. All right, we are just about to run out of fuel on that, so I am turning the battery back on here. I'm going to transfer that in. We are turning off the throttle, separating the probe, pointing nodeward once again, and I am just holding down H instead of firing up the engine to save that ignition. And there we go. We can see that we are killing the last of this Delta V. Just trying to keep an eye on how much Aerozine and NTO I'm using, because I don't want to use much if I can help it. And good enough. All right, good enough. Let's see how we did. Yeah, we've got a separation of 0 kilometers. That's perfect. Wait, that's assuming that I still had the maneuver. Let's see. Okay, intersect 2 at 0.1 kilometers. So yeah, we're going to dip below and then we're going to come back, and then this is where we want to meet. But 0.1 kilometers, that's perfect. That actually is great. We're going to have to use the engine to actually cancel that velocity. So we'll plan for that. But otherwise, we've done really well. I'm like, for as much as that was just kind of a failure of Rendezvous, that actually went pretty darn well. All right, so I think we're actually getting close enough now that I'm getting the lag of the physics warp coming through. And one thing that I want to point out is look at how awesome the MLI layers are. There's 20 layers of that on this particular stage, and it's kept almost all of the hydrogen and oxygen stable and safe and not boiled off, despite just kind of rotating around in the sun for days, for a day and a half, which is great. Just awesome. I love it. So, target velocity minus. Trying to keep an eye on our fuel here. We are flipping around. All right, so we are just a couple of minutes, or a minute or so away from our closest approach in 45 seconds. And it's going to be very close. We are going to be flying right past. So I'm just going to put, like, match velocities at closest approach to help me see exactly when this should go. Burn in 20 seconds. Does that really seem right to you? There it is. And execute node. And there we go. Yes, victory out of failure. What's the Latin for that? Good stuff. All right, so there we go. We are here and ready to dock and then push on towards the final destination of Mars. So let's set this as the target. We'll go parallel minus and control from the teeny tiny docking port right up at the top here. Oops, lost our target. All right, man, this is really exciting, and it's finally happening. Kill rotation, what's happening? Parallel minus, please. I think we were just rotating wildly for a moment there. But yeah, this is finally it. This is finally happening. I am pushing us up and around and away so that we can meet up with our final target here. And as I mentioned before, this is the spacecraft that we are getting to Mars. And this big chonker is basically something that they thought about doing a lot with Apollo, is basically putting these kind of stages here, like a big single J2 S4B stage is what they called them. This is not exactly an S4B, but it's kind of the idea, right? Like, it's a big chonker of a stage with a J2 on the end and a bunch of fuel on board so that they could use it to do things kind of like this. there was lots of large things that they were going to be able to do with that. Like one of the rendezvous missions to the moon involved, not rendezvous missions, the lunar landing mission with Gemini actually included just putting a S4B like this into orbit for the Gemini spacecraft to dock. And that is something that that I kind of did, but I did with a different architecture altogether. All right, so that's coming around. I gotta be very careful with how much fuel I have left, because I have very little. Doing what I can to make sure this goes as well as possible and efficiently as possible, because I am burning a lot of fuel on this big heavy stage. We are drifting now directly towards the target. Lining up. Slowing our translation through space. Oh, it's going to be real close too on the fuel here. Just a little bit more and we will be lined up. All right, we are pushing in. And now pushing down towards the spacecraft, the Mars Exploration Vehicle. Mars Exploration System, as it were. All right, now we should all be centered up, and I have left myself with just the tiniest amount of fuel remaining. And then this last little docking port that I have put on kind of an end cap on top of this engine bell here. It was kind of a last minute thing because I realized I didn't have any way for this thing to connect. But we are almost there. And then I'm finally going to see how well I did. Oh my gosh. Almost there. What? Did I put the wrong docking system on. I put the wrong docking module on here. I put the Apollo docking system on instead of the docking port. Propellant only that I intended to put on. All right, confession time. I messed up. When I originally put this together, I had, and when I say this, I mean this whole system, I had actually forgotten to give a way for the different spacecraft to connect with each other in any way at all. Like, A and B were able to connect, but I completely forgot that there was just no way to connect C to that whole mix. And so when I finally put those two together, I realized, oh my god, what have I done? What am I going to do? How am I going to connect the third one? And so that was, very, very stupid. And so I thought, like, okay, well, I haven't actually launched my second of the two craft yet. I've launched the first one. I had launched this, so that was already done. But I hadn't launched the second one, so I was able to go in and edit it and change one thing. I was able to add a docking port here. Underneath the engine bell, where this was originally just the decoupler that held the what do you call it? That orbital tug. So I had that on there, and that was, kind of a pain in the butt. I was able to add that, and then that worked out pretty great, where, it seemed like I was going to be able to have this connected, and it was the right docking port and all those things, but it actually was not the right docking port, as it turns out. I just realized that it was after I had gotten into orbit, so that's why this is a little bit of a save and reload here. I realized that on this craft, the original of the Mars Exploration System C, I had the docking port with propellant only, and over here, unfortunately, I had the Apollo docking system. Hooray! So yeah, that was really stupid of me. So instead of just scrubbing this entire mission, I've decided to cheat a fixed version of this back into orbit at the same cost and just blow up everything else that I had. So yeah, I spent an extra 10 grand to get that done, and that that seems worthwhile to me. Like, that mistake seems like it was worth fixing for a little bit of cash. So yeah, just wanted a full disclosure that, you know, I screwed that up, and you probably saw it coming as I was approaching, and the docking ports were completely the wrong size. But now they're both Apollo docking system, which are the androgynous version that look exactly like the docking ports with propellant only. But yeah, so now we should be able to move on. That does mean that I got to keep a little bit of extra Aerozine and NTO, a little bit of extra electric charge, and I didn't burn off any of my LH2, but it's fine. Like, it's just gonna have to be okay. So I'm sorry about that. I know you guys probably don't come here to watch me like cheat my way into orbit, but that was just the silliest possible mistake. So hopefully you can forgive me. But all that said, and all of that shame aside, we are here. We are in orbit. We are ready to roll. Everything is connected and ready to go, and these need to be shut down. A long time before those are going to be turning on, that's for sure. Let's see, where do we have... does just everything have the RCS on? Oh yeah, I should have put... I should have included some special action groups so I could actually turn these darn things off, because I don't actually want to use them for a little while. Pull that off. These. There we go. The only thing that I want to be using right now is the main stage. All right, so here we go. Here we are. We're all together. Everything is great. Let's adjust my staging. I wonder if that's going to change anything here. Okay, it looks like we have 4,375 meters per second, which is exactly what I was hoping for. So yeah, that looks like this has come together pretty darn well. We have a 104-ton spacecraft that we have assembled in orbit, ready to fly onwards towards Mars. So, phew, let's take a look at what that's going to look like. Advance transfer to another planet. We're going to reset that, and here we go. Can't really wait 7 days, friends. But up here looks pretty good. Include the capture burn, actually. There we go. That's the one. 4,000 meters per second of delta V, leaving in 8 minutes. Oh my gosh, that's too soon. But yeah, okay, let's see. That's actually very quick. Oh my gosh. Yeah, but this looks pretty darn good. Yeah, I like that. We're going to want to adjust our trajectory as we get a little closer so that we can get a nice equatorial trajectory here, because we're going to want to put these spacecraft into an orbit that is relatively equatorial. That will make things a little bit easier, I think. But first things first, let's get this maneuver node executed. So yeah, we are going in just 4 minutes, apparently. Goodness gracious. So let's just move this big chunker of a stage ready to go. And then this is going to become our kind of like core stage here. All right, so we are just lining up, and just in time, too. We only had about 20 seconds to spare there. And there we go. We are burning off towards Mars. Yes, indeed. So yeah, this has gone pretty darn well so far. This assembly went about as I expected, but there was some complications with the transfer stage, and also me forgetting what parts I was using as the docking port up here on top. It would not have mattered. It just was like I couldn't I couldn't fix the problem without like relaunching the whole thing, and that was going to require me to either revert all of the launches that I'd done or go and do a whole bunch of like save editing, maybe. I don't know. So whatever. This is the best thing that I could come up with to hopefully still show you guys some cool stuff. Hopefully it doesn't feel too tainted. But yeah, it's a complicated thing and something that I need to do better about keeping track of next time, because that is a very complicated part, like the joining up. Because I just had engine bells sticking in both directions, right? Like that seemed like the easy thing. When you get to like 3 and more segments of your spacecraft, you really need to be careful about that. But we are just about finished with our first burn. Very nice. Okay. Kill rotation. We still have a little bit of delta V remaining, so I can do a little bit of checking. If I focus the vessel, and then in about 10 minutes I make another I put another maneuver node down to adjust our trajectory, as we often have to do. All right, and it looks like this adjustment is going to give us a lot more flexibility on changing the inclination of our target, which is very, very nice. And so we want to be kind of equatorial, but I'm not sure if I want to be equatorial inclination of the moons. We do need to be. It does seem like that's going to be a helpful thing, because that's roughly where this rover site Alpha is going to be, and remember that's where we're going to have to land our rover. So yeah, it seems like having them in the orbit of the moons is as good as anywhere else. So let's plan for that. All right, and the final correction burn is coming up just now. Here we go, ignition, and burn it on down. Perfect. And there we go. That is what we're looking at for our trajectory towards Mars. Yes, indeed, I am so excited to get all of this junk all the way out to Mars. So now it's a matter of, we want to control from here. Boop. And we will say farewell to the large transfer stage. And there we go. We gently separate away, and I can just activate these RCS here around the sides, just to make sure that we have everything settled out the way that we need to. So I can remove that, and there we go. That, just these. Up. Great. Make sure everything is all settled. All right, we've got engines activated and RCS on, so we can kill rotation and prepare for the long journey towards Mars. So yeah, there we go. Let's see about the Mars exploration system. We have 5 days of electric charge because we have all sorts of avionics activated, but once we are time warping, we have plenty of power that we don't have to stress about. We are actually just a little bit over the top of how much we need here, because there are so many different things on, and there's so much communications here, but it should be good enough to get us out there. They shouldn't die so fast that we have to worry about that, the RTGs that we have powering this entire system. But yeah, so there we go. Let's see, do we want to get some science underway? We have a helium magnetometer boom, probably inside here, so maybe don't deploy that. Yeah, other than surface analysis, we don't actually have anything super interesting as far as science goes, because this is going to someplace that we've already done most of this science already. So yeah, that's it. There we go. We are heading out towards Mars. Let's get out into interplanetary space real quick. Actually, it's going to be something that we have to deal with in a little bit, because I have the Hermes to do. But yeah, I will adjust the trajectory and make sure that we are all settled in. But otherwise, this is looking really, really good. We've confirmed we have electric charge to spare, and we will just need to set up a time that we can I will set up the maneuver node, not the maneuver node, but the SOI change that will let us know that we are ready to get into the sphere of influence of Mars and make whatever adjustments we need to make on the way between here and there. But yeah, other than that, this is it. We are on the way to Mars with a combination system that is 3 launches large. And that is just the very beginning. So we have learned a lot about how to do this sort of mission, how to assemble this sort of mission. I guess I'm going to find out in a little while if any of this actually worked. But fingers crossed that this is all successful. But next time we are going to have even bigger and better things. One thing that I can also do now is decouple our docking system node here. And off that goes. And now we have just the engine. We've just popped off that little cork there that was connecting us. And this is our craft that is going to be bringing us all the way to Mars. And when we get there, hopefully we'll be able to do all kinds of cool stuff. And I think that is actually going to do it for us this time. If you enjoyed this episode, please let me know what you think down in the comments below. And I will see you next time.